Let's now bring in Bitwise Chief Investment Officer Matt Hougan. His Ether ETF is ticker ETHW. Matt, good to see you. Flows on a day like today. It's early, but already we're seeing some impressive numbers. How are you thinking about the reaction to the launch today?
Yeah, it's been an incredible reaction, to be honest. It's exceeded my expectations. Through lunchtime, we had about $500 million traded in these new ETFs. By comparison, the average ETF trades about $1 million on its launch day. So it's shaping up to be the second most successful ETF launch of all time, after, of course, the Bitcoin ETFs. And we expect to see strong flows into ETHW, the Bitwise Ethereum ETF, when we close out later today.
Not to move the conversation even forward even more, but given that you've had now two successful launches, spot Bitcoin, spot Ethereum, what's next? Ethereum had significant regulatory questions around it. Does this mean you can turn faster into more crypto assets for a spot ETF?
Great question. The first thing I would say is there are still unlocks to go, even for Bitcoin ETFs and Ethereum ETFs, just because they're approved and many people can buy them. Some of the largest wealth management platforms in the world, folks like Morgan Stanley and Merrill Lynch and others, are still working through the due diligence. So there's big steps to go forward just for those two assets. Long term, as we look into 2025, we've entered the ETF era of crypto. We're going to see ETFs on multiple crypto assets. We're going to see index-based ETFs. You've already seen firms filing for Solana ETFs. The thing we've learned from the Bitcoin and Ethereum ETF launches is that ETFs work in this asset class. They lower costs, they raise protections, and investors want them. I think we'll see a wide array in the next year or two.
Matt, you were kind of mentioning here the reticence of some financial advisors still to put their clients in these products. What is the biggest holdup? What are the biggest questions you get? Does anything need to change?
Yeah, I'll say at Bitwise, I can only speak for Bitwise. We've been working with the financial advisor and family office audience for years, and we're seeing a very strong reception. We have $2.7 billion in our Bitcoin ETF. We're seeing strong trading volume in ETHW. Part of that is because we've been educating this audience for years. So I think the real answer is just education. It takes a little bit longer for these audiences to move into these ETFs than it does for retail investors. But every indication I see tells me they're coming. I'll just share later today, we're doing a webinar with 100 financial advisors and family offices representing billions of dollars of assets to talk about ETHW and Ethereum. We're going to be doing that every day. Eventually, that's going to pay off in billions of dollars in flows.
Well, I understand that they might be interested in Ether or Bitcoin, but what's the evidence that you have, Matt, that there is demand for cryptos beyond the two largest? ETFs, crypto ETFs beyond the two largest?
Absolutely. At Bitwise, our first product was the Bitwise 10 Crypto Index Fund, a diversified index fund. And we actually find many advisors prefer that, in part because they don't have to pick and choose winners. Most financial advisors are putting 2 to 5% of their portfolio into crypto. They just want to make sure they're exposed if crypto becomes more important in the next 5 years. So I think the biggest reason they want additional assets is just diversification. But there's also an element of these smaller assets like Solana that have significant momentum. So there's some that want to speculate on those individual assets. But I think the big play for institutions, family offices, and financial advisors is actually just owning the field, owning Bitcoin, owning Ethereum, eventually owning other assets, maybe owning crypto equities. They want to do the same thing they do in stocks and bonds, which is diversify and own the asset class.
Hey, Matt, why do you think we see Ether lower today on a day when these spot Ether ETFs start to trade, and yesterday even lower when we got the news from the SEC?
Yeah, I think I'd point back to what happened after Bitcoin. We remember the Bitcoin ETF launch as a huge success, but we've blocked from our mind that Bitcoin traded from $50,000 to $40,000 before it recovered and ripped up to $72,000. There's an element of sell the news. There's an element of mixed expectations. But I'll say this, I'm enough positively surprised by the level of volume we're seeing in these ETFs out the gate that I think the sell the news fact may be shorter termed in Ethereum than it was even in Bitcoin.
Really quickly here, biggest opportunity ahead when you think about the ETF world? Is Solana the next wave, or is there something else?
Yeah, I really think it's Bitcoin and Ethereum. Remember, these are 70% of the market. They're the two biggest applications in crypto. Bitcoin as a monetary asset, ETH as the leading technology platform. If you own those, you own the largest winners in crypto. And I think most people are going to own those probably at a 2-to-1 ratio, 2 Bitcoin to 1 ETH on a proportional basis. After that, I do find investors are very interested in Solana. They're very interested in alpha strategies. They're very interested in DeFi. There's a long tail, but most of the interest is going to be in Bitcoin and ETH, at least for the next year. And I think that's a great starting point.